Hello, hello. Welcome to another
Hi,
episode of Be Open and Authentic with Rohit. Hello, Tisha. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. So, just to
Good.
give us some context on the podcast. So, today we have Teasha Cable with us, who is the founder and CEO of CModel. And Tisha has tons of experience in sales, business development, and product strategy. So today we are going to be learning about Tisha's journey in the startup world, and as well as her corporate career in sales and business development, so that we all can learn from it together. Firstly, thank you, Tisha, for taking the time to talk to me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So,
Yeah.
Tisha, can you start with a little introduction about your background and brief journey so far?
Sure. Let's see a little bit about my background. Sometimes this is such an interesting thing because as much as I like talking, talking
Nice.
about myself is hard. So I've probably been in developing my career specifically for about 20 years. I started my career in sales operations. I went to revenue operations. I was VP of Business Development and Product Strategy at Singularity University. And then
Nice.
before doing this, I was VP of Business Operations at a scale up called Sales Impact Academy. So my trajectory has been across multiple organizations over the course of my career, doing a few different things, but all headed in one general direction, which is into the role that I'm in now as CEO of
Nice.
CModel. I've also consulted, so probably the past 10 years, I consult and go into companies and help them to build the operational infrastructure necessary to forecast revenue and be able to manage sort of money in, money out. That's how the language I speak.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's you're working and also you also do consulting on the side just to make sure or just to help companies with sales as well as the revenue. That's great.
Yeah.
And so you've been hustling for the most part. And 20 years is, I'm sure you have seen a lot and done a lot and learned quite a bit too. So I'm super excited to learn, if not all, at least some of it, so that we all can take away something from your experience. Cool. Thanks for sharing this. So, earlier you were saying that uh, everything led you to the role that you are currently in. So, which is the C model. Can you talk a little bit about C model and what's your motivation behind starting the company?
For sure. So CModel is a decision intelligence company. And in the most simplistic forms, what we do is we help CEOs to make the right decisions at the right time related to the company's growth. So that's providing them deep analysis, insights, recommendations through our decision support engine. So that's at the highest level. How I got here, remember those jobs that I talked about having? Well, between that and the fact that companies were calling me in to help them with information. So everything that you think about that happens in the decision-making process, from collecting and gathering up a bunch of information, right? Finding problems and opportunities, and then figuring out what are some of the options, what are the ways that we can actually solve this problem. These are all things in one way or another that companies were calling me in to do, either in my job or as a consultant. So what I
Gotcha.
decided was it's such a hard process, right? I mean, when you talk about just the process of finding information, usually it's data all over the place, or there's no data at all.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you think about what it takes to decide what are your actual options, you rely on information from different people. You rely on subject matter expertise. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. So all this entire process I just thought could be facilitated in a much easier way using algorithms and machine learning and a connector to connect data sources, and not ignoring that people need to rely on their gut. That your instincts do matter. That is why most of us become leaders, because we want to lead with a vision.
Exactly.
So just creating a balance. Yeah,
That
that
is
was really
nice.
what drove me to create the company.
Cool. So you observe the patterns, you see the opportunity, you saw the opportunity there, and now you're working to solve it. That is great. And I want to get a little deeper into the business problem, because, for example, I've seen some companies address the same with some sort of business intelligence platform or some sort of providing some data analytics. But if you need to make a decision, you need data much beyond it, right? So because I see the term that you coined, right, decision intelligence platform. So it's not just, it's beyond the data that we have that we capture. It also depends on the market, and it also depends on the kind of the business domain and, like you said, instinct, right? How are you able to curate all this into one platform? So it has to be much more than, the technology or data analytics platform. So just curious to understand what else you are bringing into the table.
Yeah, so your point is an excellent one, and I think this is why our software is so important. So market intelligence for us today, it's in the form of benchmarks, for example. That's one entry into understanding where you match up against another company. And when you look at the basic metrics that a company needs to track over time, most of the time someone's done it before you. So learning from what others have done is okay. And benchmarks is one way to do that. It's not that benchmarks are a perfect measure alone, which is why that's only one of the inputs. The other input that's really important for us is context. So who is your company? What industry are you in? What size are you in? How much money are you bringing in? And what's the actual growth stage of your company? Are you an existence level company like mine, very early stage, and you really may or may not have a big extensive data set of product market fit? Are you a survival stage company, right, where you haven't yet hit all of the success metrics where you would just start investing everything you have into growing? Or are you a high growth company where you're ready to take off, hire an amazing sales team and just, go as far as you can possibly go? Or you're a resource mature company where it's really steady state from here on out? And what's most interesting about that is the makeup of what it takes to get into one of those groups of companies is not what people think. It's not like, oh, I'm a Series A or a Series B company. It's really about your ultimate goals too, right? Because my company is potentially a high growth company. That's where I'm headed, right? I believe we have a large market. We can grow and service a large market. Some companies are not going to be that. They're going to be small businesses. Majority of the companies that are created are going to be small businesses. A company that is going to be a small business is going to hit what they call a disengagement level, right? They're never going to go into a high growth. They're going to be successful. They're going to go existence. They're going to go to survival. They're going to hit success. And then they're going to either disengage or just ride it out as a mature company, right? That's going to be it. It's an important distinction. So that context ultimately leads to how our users experience our software. So there aren't a lot of metrics for early existence level companies. There are more that you need to track when you're at the survival stage. And then based on the values of those metrics, then that's how your analysis is presented to you and how deep it goes. Then that also depends on what kinds of recommendations you're actually provided. And so now we talked about, and I went around a little bit, but we talked about benchmarks as an input into this decision support, metrics and their values, both their current and projected values. And now we're getting ready to talk about recommendations. Oh, well, we talked about analysis, right? Because whatever the value of your metric, you need to know, is that good? Is that up? Is that down? Is it within a benchmark? Is it out of a benchmark, right? So there's observations about that data. And then there's this thing that we do, which is to ask questions of our experts. So there's an expert exchange. We ask you questions, you answer them, but then we only curate those responses to our users when it matches the analysis. Right. So my sales cycle is trending long. My accounts receivable turnover ratio is low. And then based on those things, I get recommendations as to how to actually solve them. So the processing is all of these elements go into our decision support engine, which does a bunch of curation and matching, right? And spits that information out to the end user at the right moment that it's relevant. So
well, so I see that you go like 10 level deeper and 10 level or like multi-level personalization to each company, right? I like this approach. So because decision making is the complex, or I think the most complex thing, one of the most complex things that humans do, because there is so much, even though we may not realize, but we connect so many dots based on our previous experiences, and it is so much very contextual, even based on the company or the personal experience or the leadership. So it varies a lot. So I like your approach in terms of personalizing for each company and based on the type of the company, and then understanding their goals and providing the data and analytics for them at the right moment. So which is very important. So how do you make it happen, right? Because if you are one platform, which tells me, but you cannot be super generic like other BI platforms or any other platforms. You have to be little more personalized, in the sense you need to work based on a client by client basis. So is that how you approach? You take one client and see how it all approaches them and curate the platform for that particular client, or how does it work?
Yeah, actually so this is what we come to prove is not true. You can learn up front about clients, and then you can use automation and machine learning and out statistical analysis, heuristic algorithms. There are a number of elements that apply in our backend to make it real time, right? And so what we do is take the time up front with our customers. So remember, I've got years and years of experience with multiple customers in different industries with multiple revenue models. And for each of them, the one thing that I went to prove when I went to create this business was there's a way to provide a service in a SaaS platform like this by understanding specific elements of the customer. Now, we're not all things, right? Yep. We're specifically relative to growth. So that means your money in and your money out. Right. I'm not telling you, I'm going to tell you, about other random elements within your business, right? These are specifically growth focused decisions. So we know enough to ask the right questions, consolidate the right information, connect to the right systems to make this something that doesn't have to be customized every single time. Although within the framework itself, there is customization, right? So our onboarding process means that we sit down and get to know things about you. We have to create a common language that we all speak. We have to understand what it means to govern the data together, right? We're doing it in an automated way, but in order for us to do that, we have to gather up enough information up front. So what would be a fallacy right now is for me to say, onboarding is going to take 1 week. That's not realistic, nor can I tell you that you can onboard yourself. What I can tell you is that you can have the results that I guarantee if we follow the process that we need to follow, which is to collect information up front, which is really no different than what you would do if you hired a consultant. It's also no different than what you do if your data scientist or your business analyst were getting your systems ready. The difference is once we do it, then we can take the human hands off in some areas in order for it to be, to remove some of the levels of inaccuracy that humans tend to put. And we also make it live so that you don't end up with like the 80% obsolete information that most people have to rely on because it takes long, and then usually they're focused on lagging indicators by the time they get it. So the expertise to create the system, right, in this very specific way to curate, not necessarily, it's not making it a custom, right?
Yeah.
It's a curated experience versus a custom experience. That's the way that we like to think about it. So it's highly technical, true, but the user experience isn't, because the idea that an executive, the problem today is that they get charts and graphs. No one cares about a chart and a graph. It tells you nothing, right? Our goal is to take the charts and graphs out of the executive's life. There are some tools, some people who still need to look at those, right?
Sure.
In the back end of our system, charts and graphs are created. Our machines need charts and graphs, right? I mean, well, not technically, but charts and graphs are created because the analysts that we hire to look at data and ensure that our machines are being trained properly are also looking at those charts and graphs, but not the CEOs. The executives who are like, I need information, they want to know what and why.
Sure. Yep, totally makes sense. So I like the fact that you're just targeting the growth and also being very contextual and understanding the company better during the onboarding itself, which also means that it's not easy because you are going to be asking all the hard questions, and it's not a smooth process normally, because I'm sure that all the executives will understand, because I'm sure they know all of information. But I think the onboarding process itself reveals a lot of information, which is what you'll be using to curate the decisions for the companies. Okay, I like this approach. Thanks for sharing this. So since we are talking about growth and the data that executives need or any company needs for growth, right? So what do you think are the data points or the data that startups need to gather to make sure that they're growing in the right direction, or they can grow in the right direction? Because when in the early stage, I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, whether should I use benchmarks? But I can't use benchmarks because I'm too early to, go against benchmarks. But I have to have some sort of data to validate that I'm going in the right direction, be it in the growth or sales or operations or revenue, whatever it is. So I'm sure you have seen these patterns. Just want to understand what are the right data points for startups to focus on, so that they can make sure that they're going in the right direction. More of a KPIs, in my opinion. But I would like you give me some details on it. Yeah.
So I'll give it to you in this way, because I think part of the issue is, so what happens is I think companies get a little bit confused about business process, right? So this is actually, on one hand, we can completely simplify it, and I'm going to give you an example of that, or we can make it complex. There actually aren't a lot of things that an early stage company needs to know, right? It's actually just a handful of things. And there's a few things that they watch out for. So at an existence level, like a very, very early company that doesn't yet have product market fit, a company that probably hasn't raised any money outside of their own sort of customers. They don't necessarily have customers yet who are saying, for sure, this product is serving all of my needs. They need to know how much money is going in and out of their company. They need to monitor financial statements, right? That's a simple, easy one. They need to know how to actually acquire new customers, right? That's something that they need to know. They need to know how to monitor and gauge sort of their customer and prospect interactions. What are my customers actually saying? So I need to monitor my money. I need to understand how to get a new customer. I need to know what my new customers are actually thinking. I actually need to understand sort of averages around that. How long does it take to get me that new customer? On average, they're coming from this industry. They look like this. And then I need to understand my own capacity. Right? How much time does it take me to do things? How many contractors do I have? Is it time for me to have employees? Those are bits. I need to understand opportunity costs at this age, because that one thing that I do can take me out. right? So
Okay.
being very careful about what I understand. The other thing is I do need to know what my market conditions are at the early stage, because remember, without my own internal data to give me a clear view of product market fit, what are my competitors doing? What are the benchmarks for my business in very specific areas? What are the global markets doing? How are they behaving, right? What's going to happen if I decide I'm going to fundraise, or if my customers are going to come from a certain group? What is my product offering, and do I need to tweak it? How developed is it? Am I working with an MVP that I can adjust and tweak should a customer come back and say something to me, or a prospect that tells me that I'm off track in what I'm building? Do I have the right set of metrics to track that? Am I talking to the right people? And then they also need to manage their own expectations, because sometimes, we believe our own stuff, but what does actual progress mean? Because remember, in this stage, you need to decide, are you a big high growth company? This is where the truth comes out, right? Or are you a small business, right? There's nothing wrong with being a small business at all. But we have to put people ourselves, we have to be very factual about that, because otherwise you could take a perfectly good idea and it could be squalor, because you go and try to do something with it that the idea isn't good for, right? But you could have a very profitable small business that serves somebody's needs. So those are 7, I think, things that I gave you, areas where I would say a company has to focus. So less about, just there are numbers and metrics that go with those things, but it's really that kind of focus on growth.
Great. This is great information. And I like the fact that how you just spoke about those, like on top of your mind. So I think that also proves your expertise. Not proves in the sense that conveys your expertise to the people, I guess. But anyway, so thanks for sharing this. So I think in a way, it's mostly about 2 things, right? One is understanding the broader market, maybe market conditions and all those aspects. But before that, the things that you specified, right, in terms of, what is your money in and money out, revenue, sales, or customer acquisition cost. And I like the fact how you mentioned customer prospect, what they're thinking, and what are their expectations. So which is also involving tracking this product market fit. That's how you figure out your product market fit as well as managing your expectations, which is very, very crucial, because that's what going to decide the make or break for the company. And also and also about balancing the financials, as well as finding a way to how you invest your money in the right places. I think whatever you mentioned covers multiple aspects. Those are, if I think about it, I think those are just the things that early stage companies needs to focus on. We can obviously add 100 more things to it, because thinking that we are going to solve this problem for everyone in this world, and we are going to be this sort of a company, this is going to be a $1 billion market, so I need to track like 100 things. I don't think that's the case. What if any company follows whatever you said in the right directions, having the right KPIs and right metrics? So I think that's going to be a breeze, because we can really simplify it. And let's be honest, right? In the early stage, we can talk about 100 things, or we can just talk about few things and do.
That's it.
And that's it. That's all you need.
It requires a discipline.
Exactly.
So when I put my own self into a category, when we put ourselves, I coming from being an executive in companies that already had, right? It was a very interesting thing for me to transition to a startup mindset, where now, instead of talking about strategies at these earliest stages, I need a marketing strategy, I need a sales strategy, I need to be talking about tactics, things that I need to get done now that will help me to build a strategy. I need to test methodologies. I need to understand how to make my best decisions. I need to balance, all my instincts with just the super important mission critical metrics, right? That that I need to track at this stage. Although, a month from now, I'll be in a completely different situation, right? Where now I need to track. There are a few more things. There's a different set of considerations for how to run and manage my business, but yet still focused, because that's the mission critical part of this is focus, focus, focus. Because when we don't focus, that's when we lose sight of the overarching goal. Right, you start to lose sight of what you're really trying to do, which is to build a business that solves a very specific problem. And you can't do that if you're within your own company, managing your growth, your business as something that sends you in a bunch of different directions, because that's how you overly spend money, right? I want to hire some specialist to do something when you don't even need to be doing that thing. Well, now that's money you spent. I'm going to get a tool to help me to do this thing before you even need to do that. Now you've spent money, and then you end up, it's that one decision thing, right? That can end up breaking you.
Exactly. That is so true. And this is some of the common patterns that I observed in many of the startups as well, across all the domains. And I really want to emphasize your point in terms of focus, right? Because that is the most important thing. Once you start solving the problem, I'm sure we need to be flexible to adapt and change based on the market conditions, but not deviate from it. I think adaptability and deviation, I think there is a thin line there, particularly with the constant amount of information that we are being overloaded with. We can just, it's so easy to lose the focus and deviate and build something new. Sometimes it may work, but if you're conscious about it, that's a good thing. But if we have to understand whether we are being deviated, or whether we are trying to adopt it, right? I think, but nonetheless, focus is the very key thing that I think every company needs to focus on. Thanks for emphasizing on it and sharing your experience with it. So, and coming back to this sales and business development that we are talking, right? So, in the early stage, that is the most important thing, in my opinion, that many startup founders tend to ignore or put less emphasis on or invest little on. Because particularly, I'm in the tech domain. That is the last thing that I really want to do. I can build things, but if you ask me about sales and marketing, I will find a way to deviate from it, or I'll find a way to ignore it for the most part. But that is the bread and butter for the organization along with the product. Right? Even if you have awesome product, if your sales and marketing strategy sucks, you're not going to get anywhere. So based on your experience, can you share some of the strategies that early stage companies can follow in any domain?
Okay, so that's an interesting one. And I'm going to come at this in two different ways, because on one hand, I have experience selling and then building, of course, the operational infrastructure to sell, but things that existed, right, in companies with existing brands, I guess is what I should say, right?
Yep.
So that's one level of experience. And then there's what I'm actually experiencing right now, right? So this part will come from a very real, this is what I'm experiencing, because now I'm selling something that I'm creating, right, as a startup founder, which is a different thing, because there is no existing brand, right? This is all being built. So here's what I would say. I would say that your passion as a founder, your passion for what you've created is your strength, right? I have built something, and in these early stages, I am out selling it, right? Along with my team also being my co-founders, right? We are out selling because we have an understanding of what it is that we're selling, and we have passion for it, right? We believe that this will work. So that passion is not for naught. That is a huge part of what goes into your selling motion in these early stages. That's a new lesson for me, right? Because coming in with having, experience, I say, oh, I got to get my sales process. I've got to be able to understand the next click. I've got to know what data I'm going to track. But the truth is that the data you're tracking is prospect sentiment. What does that prospect tell you about what it is that you're saying? How many of those calls do they actually let you record so you can go back and listen and watch how they respond when you demo, or how they respond when you give them certain data points or elements about the tool or the solution that you're providing to them? The other thing is, do they believe in you, right? Because sometimes we're in the early stages, you're selling something that isn't the complete vision just yet. It is part of the vision, right? My tool is no exception, right? It exists. It is doing great things. It is a part of the vision. The whole solution that we sell, though, is in development. Does that person believe, right, that you're going to do it? They won't if there isn't any comprehensive understanding, if you haven't done your research about why they need it, right? So that you can try to connect those dots. I think in these early stages, one thing I'm learning is that some level of really targeting is important too, and being very specific about who you're asking to be customers at this stage. I've taken an approach where I'm like, I want to really test, right? I'm really curious about what lots of different people think. But at the end of the day, I keep coming back to this place that we need to be very specific about who we're asking to try, or who we're asking to jump on the boat and be with us on this journey. Because ultimately what you're looking for is data that proves that you have product market fit. Because if you make a mistake in this area and you use, let's say I go out and get 100 people to sign up, but those 100 people don't ultimately look like the people who I said I was solving this problem for, right? They may sign up, but if I'm unable to solve their actual problem, if I can't make the thing do what it's supposed to do, that's going to become a challenge down the line. It's going to be a challenge in getting the actual data I need to say, I got PMF over here, right? We're ready to go. There's a potential for this thing to grow in an exponential way. So the idea is to make the early selling process more about conversations, more about interactions where you're learning things and understanding things, and really being honest and upfront about the offer, right? Here's where we are, and being really passionate about what you have, because if it's worth something to you, you put that in, and I think people will respond to that. I think it's a mistake to just make it a volume game too early. Now, there's a time and a place for the volume game, right? No one makes money or builds high growth companies without getting lots and lots of people. But I think it's super important to understand what you're selling first.
So I think it starts with having a strong passion for the product and believing in the product, because there is a reason that we build the product. Sometimes we may get the wrong signals that takes out the confidence in us, but we just got to have our instinct or focus on the product and get the right data points to understand the customer patterns, right? I think the thing that you specified in terms of understanding the clicks or understanding the customer patterns in the current or future, I think it conveys us something, and that is so true. But the other point that you mentioned in terms of we may get 100 signups, which is actually a good thing. But if those are not your prospect customers, or if those are not the people that you are solving the problem for, that's gonna give you the mixed signals. So which takes out the confidence as well. So I think we got to be very intentful about the people that we are talking to or selling for, so that we get the right signals. And the other point is, this is where it gets tricky, right? You are a startup, you don't have the fully product, you are selling the vision, but vision is not the people not the thing that people pay for. They pay for the product. So how do you balance that out? So you have to find a way to get them believe in the product, or you have to have that MVP where it can be worth paying. So which is a very, very tricky part, right? Because I mean, it's so hard to sell at the early stages. So do you have any specific recommendations on this particular aspect?
Yeah. So number one, your product has to have value. Like you can't, you have to understand the value in your product at every phase of its development. So there is no MVP if there is no value to the customer, right? So you can have, let's say you've got a modulistic product. I've got a modulistic product. Not every module of my product is developed, but I have value in the modules that are. I didn't go to market and sell anything to anyone until I had that, right? Until I had something really valuable to them. I don't mean like you can log in, right? I mean, where I can deliver you something that you're going to be like, and now that I have this, I'll wait for everything else you have, right? Because this is on its way to being this amazing product or this amazing solution, mostly because it solves a critical problem. So really, your MVP has to ultimately solve your problem. It can't be, I've just got an MVP that is a piece of technology, because no one cares, right? What they care about. So that's really where the value is. So maybe that MVP should go from minimum viable product to minimum value product, right? Because it's really about the customer being able to retrieve something. So I don't sell a vision for the sake of a vision. I'm selling a vision in a lot of ways, right? Because there are elements to be developed, but there is value in the thing that I'm asking you to jump on board and be a part of now, and then help me to make amazing with your feedback, and you're continuously being a part of the loop. So I think there's an honesty factor, right, in this too, and you build trust, right? Being honest. So, like for example, our onboarding process right now, and this is going to be public. Our onboarding process today is not as perfect as it will be when we get further down the line. It takes a while. You can't get the level of analysis that we're providing to your company, right? You can't get this in an automated way without me learning a lot about your company. So we're going to take our time and know about your company, right? And sorry, customer, it just takes us a little bit, right? And then once we get you going, now we're off and running, and we could provide this value that we promised to you. And then that will only increase over time. It will only get better as we get further and further down the line. So it's to be careful that we're selling a vision that is realistic, right? But one that we should be passionate about that realistic vision too, but it is also to be careful that the product has a true value to the customer.
Gotcha.
Otherwise you won't get to the next phase.
Agreed. Totally makes sense. So it's not just the vision that you're selling, obviously not the vision that you're selling. So it's about the MVP. But MVP is more, in terms of the customer standpoint, it has to be minimum payable version. So it can be minimal, viable for us. But is it, if you are selling to a customer, is it minimum payable version for them to be able to pay for it?
That's correct.
I think I just coined this term. I'll probably use it more. But it totally makes sense. And in terms of how do we approach it, we have to modularize in a way that whatever you're releasing or whatever you are asking, to pay the customer, it has to be worth it. It has to have enough value before you go sell it. Totally makes sense. And that's how we also easily understand the product market fit. If they're not paying, it is giving us red signals. Or if they want few more features, everything is a data point. So if we have that minimum viable or payable product, then we know that it's easy to approach the product, identify the product market fit or understand our sales process itself. So thanks for sharing it.
There's lots to learn in that space. Like, I don't know. Here's the other thing. I don't know everything there is to know. Because remember, there was what I did as a leader in companies with the brands that existed and what I'm learning as an entrepreneur, right? With a brand that is developing. It's just totally different, but yeah.
Exactly. And this is where my next question goes, right? So how do we set the process? Because it cannot always be like, let's go reach out in LinkedIn, ask or identify the product market fit, or ask customers to try it and give us some feedback. And it's fine. But how do we develop and have the right infrastructure or processes in place so that, they are scalable and we know that we are going in the right direction, be it for sales or operations? I know you've done it at multiple companies, but just want to understand how those can be replicated in startups. If not the same, I think it has to there have to be many tweaks. But how can we take from those companies and how can we incorporate it in the startup that we are building?
Yeah. That's a great question. So what I would say is, remember, context is everything, right? So if you take your company, everything is about that context, because metrics, for example, are a great way to decide what type of infrastructure you need. Yep. So if I'm a SaaS company, if I've got to track ARR, then I need a way of collecting the data required to calculate the value of ARR. So it depends on, that could be a spreadsheet if I'm entry level, that could be a CRM and my financial system, right? Yep. I've got to decide how much. Now I'm like, so is it $0 in ARR? In that case, Excel is beautiful, right? Yep. Or are we talking about millions of dollars in ARR where I'm going to need to track, I need a CRM, and then of course I've got my financial system to track the final version of that, to track my sales work, right? So the infrastructure to me is also connected to the context, right? Where am I as a company, and what volumes of things am I taking in right now? And then based on that, I decide what kind of systems and tools that I actually need in order to execute collecting the data necessary to measure that value. Right now, if I put myself out there to track a million things. So, for example, an early stage company in its first year, unless it has a B2B, let's be even more specific. So a B2B sales type company that's selling annual contracts to companies, in year one, one of your metrics probably isn't your renewal rate, right? Yep. In just as an example. Why? Yep. Because, you're not yet renewing anybody. First, you're bringing folks in, they're on an annualized contract. These are like, this is a small decision, but it's a decision to make, because if I decided that I was going to track that right now, then there's processing and mechanisms I have to put in place to track it, right? Yeah. That might not have been like the best example, but I'm going to stick with it anyway, right? So because if I select that, and I put all the necessary processes around it in place to track it, then I've got to say who's going to manage that process, because in order for me to collect that data, it requires some people to do stuff a certain type of way. Do I have those people in my company today? Right. And if I'm measuring something like a renewal rate or churn at this point, then I need to know why. Right. So does that mean that I've hired like a customer success person, or is that me kind of measuring why? But for every one of these things that we say is a metric or data point, there's a process that governs it, and there's a person that's usually responsible for making sure that process runs. So every single bit of infrastructure that gets built in your company is all related to that same context, because you will get off track real quick.
Yeah.
If you're operating and tracking things that you really don't need, because then you go build stuff that you don't need to build, right? Even if you spend time building out a complex formula to track something in a spreadsheet, let's say you don't have a fantastic tool like mine that does it all for you, and you are in this, that's time, because now I need someone who understands how to use that spreadsheet and put that information in. And then I also need someone who's going to understand how to interpret that for me, right? So you start to create complexities in your business that you just don't actually need. So sticking to who you are dictates everything.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But and I want to emphasize the point that you mentioned here. So I see there's a lot of value in it, in terms of you need to identify the KPIs that you want to track and make sure that those are the right, KPIs to track in the early stage.
Right.
Maybe error may or may not work for everyone, but we need to identify those KPIs. And we need to work backwards from there to build this infrastructure or mechanisms in place to get the data for us. And the key point here is, sure, you're tracking those, but do you have a person responsible to improve those numbers for you, or to make sure that those are put in the right direction and we are moving in the right direction? So that is a customer success, or any person in the it can just be CEO at the beginning, but someone has to be really responsible for doing the end-to-end process. We have the KPIs, great. Okay, so how do we get the data? It can be as simple as website clicks or some Google Analytics, or maybe some of the spreadsheets where it says about customer interaction or product market fit, or be whatever it is. So are we gathering the right data and curating in the right way to get the KPI? And it's not about having the KPI. How are we improving the performance, right? So we need to have a personnel to take care of it for us and make sure that we are going in the right direction. So this is how seems like this is how the sales pipelines or any growth pipelines are built at the companies. Okay, that is very, very insightful. I like this approach. Thanks for sharing it, Teasha.
Yeah,
I know,
no problem.
I know I can ask 10 more questions, because I think I feel like we are just starting the discussion. Because this is actually what I want to cover. I know, but I also want to be cognizant of the time here. Cool. Okay, I think we'll continue for a couple of more questions. So in terms of the sales, since we're talking about the sales, as a founder, let's say I'm a technical person. This is something that I really try to avoid at my previous startup, or I've seen technical founders avoiding this process startups because they just like building products, and I've seen at some other companies, even the business persons, it's not everyone has expertise on sales, and I think sales is not the easiest thing to pick up. It is maybe natural for so many people, but it's definitely not easy in my opinion. So as a non-sales person, or as a business person, or for any person that's not into sales, so what do you recommend, how for the founders, either to learn, or how can they have these processes built so that they are not really ignoring it, or they are doing, to ensure that they are doing it the right way?
Yeah. So I think that one of the things is this. So it's so funny we're having this conversation. So and this is not intended to be a sales pitch, but I have to say this. So the reason why CModel exists is our decision support engine, right? The recommendations that come out of that are for this purpose. So you don't know a lot of things. We already knew coming into this that 67% of CEOs, right, and SaaS companies have never been CEOs before. 79% of them have never been leaders in companies, and less than 5% of them have ever even been on growth related teams. Right. So we know that's the data. So with that being the case, getting insights about things you should do related to your company's growth in the moment that you see information. Like if I'm looking at my sales trending in a certain direction, it's in that moment that I actually need a recommendation about something I should do. Right. It's really, so you can't, every single idea that I might have about things you should do, it really depends on what's happening in your business. This is why CModel is so important, because it curates that recommendation to that moment, right? So in general, we could be like, oh, you should be doing these 20 things. But these 20 things may not help you out of context if they're not aligned to what's going on in your business today. So that's the whole purpose. So thank you for giving me a chance to say that.
Sure,
because
of course.
that's the whole intent. What I would say is, though, there are resources for founders in different places. So there are resources like Sales Impact Academy has classes and courses. Pavilion has classes and courses. LinkedIn Learning has classes and courses. As you can see, I'm non-denominational here. There are classes and courses that you can take to give you, niche skills in sort of talking to or thinking about your customer. The thing is, it's very important to apply that to what you know about your customer and your product, right? And really your problem. So ultimately, one of the things that I've been learning, and I'm saying learning because I'm in this process now, is that every person that I'm talking to is a human being too. They're a person too, right? And they're going to identify more with me solving a problem for them than I am with anything else. So anything that teaches us to be sensitive about how to recognize a customer's challenges, right, and their problem, and how you can sort of match that to what you're doing, to me feels like good ways to take maybe these courses and classes and then bring it back inside and go, okay, I learned these kind of tips and tricks when things look like this. Here's how I might apply this based on this kind of problem related to my customer and my product. So I do say that education is everything. I think that a tool like ours is super helpful, because then you get a chance to get these from real subject matter experts, by the way, right? These are people we vet that really have good information. We ask very specific questions. So then curating that information and back to you at the right time is important. But just in general, there are resources to learn things. Those things aren't ever going to be, they're not going to teach tech folks, though, how to be passionate about sales. But it will give you, I think, structure around your selling process that could help you to make things repeatable, because that's really the whole goal, is to find what's going to be repeatable. That's why investors invest in us. All of that comes because we create something that, ultimately the goal is that I don't have to be on every sales call down the line, but the person that I hire can be just as passionate about it. So we do have to find how to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this. And then I understand. No, I think I also understand better on why CModel is important after talking about all those problems than, when I learned about CModel to start with. So, if anyone wants to learn, I think there are multiple things that, Teasha shared, but applying those to the context and finding a way to make those repeatable, and scalable, because we cannot keep selling to everyone, right? We have a bandwidth constraints and we have so many resource constraints as well. So how can we build a process? And most importantly, how can we improvise to the context that we are in? Be it the company, the business domain, or anything, is very crucial. Obviously, learning is the most crucial part, but applying those things in the right way is equally crucial as well. Cool. Yeah, I think, and this is great. Thanks for sharing those, Teasha. So And just want to add one more point here. So sure, we learn those, but ultimately it goes back to the earlier point that we discussed in terms of, okay, we have this sales process in place, but understanding the KPIs that we want to track, even in terms of sales, and building the infrastructure for it, which again is probably the sales pipeline or the process that we have in place, and adding the right resources for it, I think will give us the end-to-end pipeline about sales and operational infrastructure, I guess. But if you have the luxury of talking to experts or tools like CModel, if you can afford or find a way to get those tools for you, I think that's even better. But nonetheless, this is the process I think every tech or any founder should have in place or should follow, at least in my opinion. Cool. I mean, this is very insightful and very knowledgeable. Thank you, Teasha. So now I'm gonna. Thank you. So I'm gonna take a little bit of step back and want to learn more about you. So I know you were in the corporate roles, and now you've seen the problem and you want to solve at a bigger scale, which is great. But that also means that you are quitting your corporate career. Right? You may do consulting, but you may not always do it, because once you are into the product, you are like so deep into it that you really want to focus on the product. But you are losing out, at least for a brief period of time. You are losing out on a bigger paycheck, on a luxury lifestyle, and also risking those things for the longer term as well. You never know what because the success rate of products is very low compared to the bigger picture. So by any means, I'm not saying that we cannot build great products, but we are still risking so many things to start the company. So what is your motivating factor, and what was your thought process while making the decision? Because since I'm in the corporate environment, I can totally understand the pain here. So just curious to understand your thought process and what really motivated you to start the company.
So what a fantastic question. So what's interesting is it's a few-fold for me on this. So it was a risk. It was a risk on sort of my career, right? You develop a career to a certain point. Very few Black women ever have the kinds of roles that I've had in my career. And so to leave that behind was a risk, because who knows if I get it again. I mean, I'm confident and believe in myself and what we're building, but at the same time, risk, right? Yep. It was a risk for my family because of, you bring home the kind of salary that I had, and now not having that, my husband had to agree, we had to be on the same page. He was very supportive. It demonstrates how much he believes in me. But we made that decision together because we also have 6 adult children, young adult children, and grandkids, right? And there's a lot in our family that this impacts it by me being able to do this. But again, confidence and belief that we can was one of the big factors. The other is even more generational than that, right? My grandmother was 2nd generation off of a plantation in Zachary, Louisiana. So my family, I feel like we're just not so far from levels of poverty, right? That, I'm calling my ancestors, these are my family members not that long ago, lived through. So building a business like this, if we're successful, God willing, then, we'll have an opportunity to build something far more substantial for the next few generations in my family. So the risk is worth it for that. And then I think of this last thing, which is, so I have a daughter who's an artist, right? And I'm going to use her as an example. And I think there are more artists in the world, but if people don't know that if that's not an opportunity for them, right, then we won't get the beauty of what they have to present to us, because they never think that there's an opportunity for them to do this and be an entrepreneur and figure it out. So part of my why is that ideally, if I can enable the people in my family to have the opportunity to go build and create and be as special as they were built to be, then the next generation gets to do that, and the next generation, and then people get more value out of their work, right? Because now they're working on things that not only are, can make them money, right? But that they get some personal joy and fulfillment out of, or they get a chance to create and learn how to build. When I started my career, that was one of the things that I found in operations. One of the things I found was I still had the ability to create and be special. I could build things and solve problems with creative solutions. That can be applied in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, I'd love to see more people have that chance. So it was a risk, but if that's one of the outcomes, risk worth taking.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you, and I feel you too, because here it's not just about us or just one family too, right? Because if you have seen a lot, or if your family has seen a lot, and if you are enabling them to see a bigger picture, and if you are proving to the world that we can do this, I'm so sure so many people would follow us and would start learning that we can create so much more value with our skill set. Because at this point, we need more and more enablers, right? Particularly, in the African American community, that the opportunities have been narrowed down due to whatever. So, factors are, they're super narrowed down, but the potential is so much more, right? So now you are stepping in and say that, hey, let's not have the narrow mindset, let's start building things, because we can do those things, and start being an example to so many other folks around us, particularly to our own kids or the family members, and to the great people around us. If we can prove those, the impact is much more, right? Many people will start following us, which also means that we are building the generational wealth that we really need to build, so that we all can learn and develop together. And particularly, that's also paying, kind of tribute to our own ancestors or family members who fought so hard for us to get us here. And I think it really goes multifold. And coming back to the point in terms of, but that is great, but also you have to get a buy-in from the family and kids, in multiple factors. And if you have that support, that we have to be really grateful for it. And also make sure that, we give it back to them in some other way. So cool. Yeah. Thanks for, being open and authentic, actually, on this. This is very important. And this is one of the reasons that I do this podcast too, because we have to convey these journeys to the people. Yes. And also, sure, we have to, give some value, but I think there is a bit of a, disconnect, because we can talk about so many technical things. If you're not talking about why you started your journey and what it is now, I think many other folks miss out on learning and being inspired from you, because this is such a big risk to take. But you're also proving that we can do things. So if people can listen to you and learn that, hey, why shouldn't I at least try it out, right? That is the thought process that needs to be embedded into the people, and which is what this podcast is trying a little bit to do. But anyway, thanks for really being open and authentic. That is so good to hear and learn from you.
Well, you are welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And one last question, Teasha.
For sure.
So, this is something that I asked to all the guests. So, if you need a minute, you can take it after this question. But I'm sure you have so many things on top. You can just give it to me right away. So, can you help me learn something in 2 minutes that took very long for you to learn?
Oof. Okay. In 2 minutes, it took me a long time to learn. Can it be, does it have to be sort of like a
Anything.
businessy thing? Anything.
No,
Okay.
anything that you learned.
Okay. So, okay, and it's complex. So sometimes you have to go fast and sometimes you have to go slow.
Yep.
That is my learning. So there are elements of things we do where we just gotta go. We just gotta like knock it out.
Yep.
You cannot procrastinate. And there are a number of things like hiring people is an example of one where you must go slow.
Yep.
Yep, you have to. That is not a go fast element, but if you've got 10 calls to make in a day, like knock it out, right?
Yeah.
Get it done and keep it moving. But so the balancing when to go fast and go slow, as an entrepreneur, I get a chance to really take that in, and I get a chance to really utilize that lesson. So that's it. And I don't know if that's really if it's a tip or if that's helpful to anyone, because I didn't say the what, but it's a thing I would say that we all have to learn about our own experience, when to go fast and when to go slow.
Yeah, that is a very, very valuable tip, because you really have to go fast and knock out so many things, but you cannot just do the same all the time. Knocking out the things is important to get the work done, but in the key things like hiring or making decisions, about the company or anything, you have to be really slow and thorough. I mean, slow can be interpreted in many ways, but thoughtful and taking your own time to do the things is very important. And that is such a hard skill to learn and adopt, because that takes discipline, patience, and focus. That is a very valuable lesson. Thanks for sharing it, Teasha. So again, I can keep on going because I want to talk more about your experience a little bit more, but I think we can probably do another episode, because this is still in the morning. We have a lot of work to knock off for the day. Sometimes maybe it's the day. Yes. So cool. I'm gonna end it here. Again, thanks a lot, Teasha. Thanks for really being open and authentic and sharing your valuable information with us, so that it's a wonderful opportunity for everyone to learn from this episode and from you as well. So I'm gonna attach all the links in the video if anyone wants to learn more about Teasha or the great work that she is doing at CModel. So yeah, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Have a wonderful day. Of course, it's my honor and pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.